Your grandmother knew things that could keep you alive, not metaphorically, literally. She fed a family of 6 on $12 a week. She preserved food without electricity. She made medicine from what grew in the yard. She mended a coat for 10 winters instead of buying a new one. And when the financial system collapsed in 1929, she did not panic. She already knew how to live without it. In the next 20 minutes, I will walk you through 25 forgotten skills from the Depression era. Skills your grandmother knew by hand. Skills that disappeared in 2 generations because they stopped being necessary. Skills that will matter again the next time the grid fails, the shelves go empty, or the dollar buys half of what it bought last year. I'm not making this dramatic. I'm telling you what was normal in 1932, and what may be normal again sooner than anyone watching this thinks. Before we start, one honest note. These are not internet survival fantasies. Every skill in this video was documented in Department of Agriculture pamphlets and extension bulletins between 1929 and 1939. The Depression generation did not survive because they were tougher. They survived because they knew things we forgot. Things that fell out of common knowledge because paychecks and refrigerators made them feel unnecessary. The unnecessary part is what changes when the system stops working. If you want the complete written reference for these skills, with exact measurements, fermentation ratios, salt cure proportions, and storage timelines, the link is in the description. It is called the Survival Research. One-time access, 7 days money-back guarantee. Half the people watching this will be glad they have it the first time the power goes out for more than 2 days. I will come back to it later. For now, the skills your grandmother used. Skill 1. Egg preservation in sodium silicate, also called water glass. Your grandmother had eggs in February even though the hens stopped laying in November. The method is simple. Fresh unwashed eggs go into a clean crock. You mix sodium silicate with cool boiled water at about 1 part silicate to 10 parts water. You pour the solution over the eggs until they are fully submerged. You cover the crock and leave it in a cool, dark place. Eggs stay edible for 6 to 9 months. The silicate seals the porous shell, and bacteria cannot get in. The method was tested by the U.S. Department of Agriculture in 1917 and confirmed safe. Sodium silicate still sells for under $15. 1 crock of eggs gets a family through a winter. Skill 2. Rendering lard and tallow for long-term fat storage. Your grandmother did not have refrigerated butter or industrial seed oils. She had a clay pot of rendered lard on the counter that lasted 6 months without spoiling. Lard is pork fat slowly melted, strained, and clarified. Tallow is the same process with beef fat. Both are shelf-stable in a cool, dark place. They cook at higher heat than butter. They do not turn rancid the way modern vegetable oils do. The fat from one pig at slaughter rendered down to roughly 30 pounds of cooking fat. That was a year of frying for a family of 5. There are 1932 records of properly rendered tallow, stored for 2 years in a root cellar and still safe to eat. Skill 3. Sourdough starter. Your grandmother did not buy yeast in a packet. She kept a jar of fermented flour and water alive on the counter for years, sometimes decades, passed down from her own mother. A sourdough starter is just flour and water colonized by wild yeast and lactobacillus bacteria. Fed once a day with fresh flour and water, it stays active indefinitely. When commercial yeast became scarce during the Depression, families with a living starter kept baking bread. Families without one did not. The long fermentation also breaks down phytic acid in whole grain flour, which is what makes whole wheat hard to digest. Your grandmother's bread was easier on the gut than anything in a modern bakery. Let me tell you a quick story. Eleanor is 67, lives in Sarasota, Florida. Retired school teacher, 38 years in the classroom. Her husband Frank passed in 2019, 4 kids, 11 grandchildren. Eleanor has lived through 5 major hurricanes in Sarasota. Andrew, Charlie, Wilma, Irma, Ian. She has, in her own words, never panicked once. Every August, she takes inventory. She fills jugs. She tests the generator. She rotates her stored food. Her grown children call her, quote, charming about it. 2 years ago, her daughter, who lives in Tampa, gave her the survival research as a gift. Eleanor read it cover to cover the same week. She told her daughter that 90% of what was inside was what her own mother had taught her growing up in rural Georgia in the 1960s. Egg preservation, lard rendering, sourdough, sauerkraut. The same skills in this video. The other 10% was technical updates, modern water filtration, battery storage, things that fit alongside the basics, not instead of them. Last September, Hurricane Idalia. Eleanor's neighbors, a couple in their 30s, were at Home Depot at 9 at night fighting over the last battery-operated lanterns. Eleanor was at home, calm, reading. The next morning she made coffee for the couple down the street whose power had gone out. Her power was also out. Her coffee maker was running on a small inverter Frank had set up in 2010. The complete documentation costs less than what Eleanor's neighbors spent on the wrong supplies the night before that storm. 7 days money-back guarantee. Link in the description. When the grid fails, knowledge does not. Before I continue, one quick thing. The survival research has the complete cure ratios for pork, beef, fish, and game, plus a diagram for the simplest possible smokehouse build, the exact temperatures, the wood types to use, and the wood types that will ruin a year of work. Link in the description. When the grocery store has a 48-hour gap, the family with cured meat in the basement keeps eating normally. Back to the skills. Skill 4. Salt curing meat. Before refrigeration, your grandmother turned a fresh pork belly into bacon that lasted a year. The ratio is 2.5% salt to the total weight of the meat, with optional sugar and spices. The meat is buried in the cure for 1 week per inch of thickness. Then it is rinsed, dried, and either smoked or hung to age. The salt draws water out of the muscle. Without water, bacteria and mold cannot grow. Properly cured ham hung in a cool, dry place was edible after 18 months. The technique works on beef, venison, fish, and small game. Skill 5. Smoking meat. The cured meat went into a smokehouse for 48 to 72 hours of cold smoke under 100 degrees Fahrenheit. Hickory, apple, oak, or maple. Never softwood, which leaves a creosote taste. A simple smokehouse was a wooden box with a small wood fire vented through it. The same setup works today with a 55-gallon barrel and a hot plate with wood chips. Skill 6. Drying apples on string, called snits in Pennsylvania Dutch communities. Apples were peeled, cored, sliced into rings, threaded onto cotton string, and hung in a dry, warm room. 5 to 7 days later, they were leather dry and would store for a year in a sealed crock. The same method works with pears, peaches, and figs. Vitamin C survives the drying. Sugar concentrates. A single tree produced winter snacks for a household. Skill 7. Leather breeches. Green beans threaded on a string and hung in the sun to dry. The name comes from how the dried pods look like miniature leather pants. Stored in cotton sacks, they kept for 2 years without any canning, reconstituted by soaking overnight and simmering for an hour. The flavor is different from canned beans, smokier, more concentrated. This was the standard way to preserve a green bean harvest in the southern Appalachians for 200 years. Skill 8. Root cellaring with ethylene separation. Your grandmother stored apples and potatoes in separate parts of the cellar for a reason. Apples release ethylene gas as they ripen. Potatoes exposed to ethylene sprout faster and rot. The same gas damages onions and most root vegetables. A proper root cellar holds 32 to 40 degrees Fahrenheit and 90% humidity. Apples in one corner, potatoes in the opposite corner, carrots and beets in damp sand. Onions hung in mesh bags away from everything else. 6 months of fresh produce with no electricity and no canning. Skill 9. Sauerkraut and lacto fermentation. Cabbage, salt, and thyme. 2% salt by weight of shredded cabbage. Pack it in a crock under a weighted plate. Cover with cloth. The natural bacteria on the cabbage produce lactic acid, which preserves the vegetable and creates probiotics. Ready in 4 to 6 weeks. Lasts 6 months in a cool place. The same technique works on carrots, beets, radishes, peppers, and cucumbers. This is how Eastern European immigrants got vitamin C through American winters. Skill 10. Bone broth as nutritional baseline. Nothing on the animal was wasted. After the meat was eaten, the bones simmered for 12 to 24 hours in water with a tablespoon of vinegar. The acid pulled minerals and gelatin out of the bones. A pot of broth was the start of every soup, stew, gravy, and sauce in the kitchen. One chicken fed a family 3 times. Roast, sandwiches, broth. Skill 11. Bacon grease as cooking fat. After every breakfast, the bacon grease was strained through a cloth into a metal can on the back of the stove. This was the cooking fat for the rest of the day and week. Eggs, greens, and cornbread all cooked in it. Free flavor, free fat, 0 waste. Skill 12. Stretching meat with grain. A pound of ground beef in 1932 fed 6 people because it was mixed with oats, breadcrumbs, rice, or beans. A meatloaf was 30% meat and 70% everything else. The technique survives in recipes for shepherd's pie, stuffed peppers, hand pies, and most casseroles. Protein is protein. The body does not know if it came straight from the cow or stretched with oats. Skill 13. Wild foraging. Your grandmother knew which weeds in the yard were food. Dandelion greens taste like arugula, and the roots roast into a coffee substitute. Lamb's quarters taste like spinach and grows in any disturbed soil. Purslane is rich in omega-3 fatty acids and grows in every sidewalk crack in summer. A single afternoon of foraging in May produced a week of salad greens for free. Skill 14. Coffee substitutes. When coffee became expensive, families roasted chicory root, dandelion root, barley, or acorns. The roasted material was ground and brewed exactly like coffee. The flavor is different, earthier, less acidic. Chicory, in particular, was so common in 1932 that mixed coffee and chicory blends are still sold in Louisiana today. Skill 15. Soap from wood ash, lye, and animal fat. Wood ash from the stove was leached with water in a wooden barrel to produce potassium hydroxide solution, called lye. The lye was combined with melted animal fat in specific ratios. The chemical reaction is called saponification. The product is soap. A year of household soap came from a winter of wood ash and a few pounds of fat trimmings. This is not survival theory. It is how everyone made soap before 1910. Skill 16, vinegar as universal cleaner. White vinegar is roughly 5% acetic acid. It kills most household bacteria, dissolves mineral scale, cuts grease, and disinfects surfaces. Mixed with water, it cleaned floors, windows, dishes, and laundry. Pure vinegar removed rust from cast iron and lime from kettles. Your grandmother's entire cleaning supply was vinegar, baking soda, salt, and lye soap. That is it. Skill 17, newspaper as insulation. Layers of newspaper stuffed between the storm window and the inner window dropped the heat loss of a single pane window by close to 40%. Newspaper inside a coat or under a thin blanket added measurable warmth. This is documented in 1933 Civilian Conservation Corps manuals about cold weather work. The principle is dead airspace. The fiber traps still air, which is a poor conductor of heat. Skill 18, mending and darning. A pair of wool socks was darned, not replaced. A shirt missing a button got a new button from a saved button jar. A torn knee on pants got a patch cut from an unwearable garment. The average garment in 1932 stayed in use for 7 to 10 years. The skill is small. The cumulative result over a decade is hundreds of dollars saved per person. Skill 19, flour sack clothing. By 1934, flour, sugar, and feed companies were printing patterns on their cotton sacks because they knew rural women were sewing them into dresses, shirts, and aprons. The sacks were free with the purchase. The fabric was sturdy cotton, 8 to 10 yards per family with weekly flour. Some companies competed on pattern selection because the woman in the household chose the brand by the print. A complete summer wardrobe for a child cost $0 in fabric. Skill 20, tooth cleaning with baking soda. Sodium bicarbonate has been used as a dentifrice since the 1800s. It is mildly abrasive enough to clean plaque without damaging enamel, and alkaline enough to neutralize acid. Half a teaspoon on a wet toothbrush, pennies per use. No fluoride question, no foaming agents, no plastic packaging. Skill 21, onion honey cough syrup. Slice a yellow onion, layer with honey in a glass jar. Cover and let sit at room temperature for 6 to 12 hours. The honey draws the juice out of the onion. You spoon the syrup off the top. Honey is antimicrobial. Onion contains quercetin, which is a natural antihistamine. This was the standard cough remedy in most American households until 1950. Modern studies confirm honey works as well as over-the-counter cough suppressants for nighttime cough. Skill 22, mustard plaster for chest congestion. A paste of dry mustard powder, flour, and warm water, spread on a cloth, folded, and placed on the chest. The mustard volatiles increase blood flow to the area and loosen mucus. Left on for 10 to 15 minutes, never directly on skin, always through a cloth. Removed before the skin reddens significantly. This was the standard treatment for bronchitis and chest colds for 200 years. Skill 23, hot brick for bed warmth. A clean brick was warmed for an hour in the wood stove or oven, wrapped in cloth, and placed at the foot of the bed 30 minutes before sleep. The brick releases heat for 4 to 6 hours. A family of 5 used 5 bricks. No electricity, no fuel during the night. Skill 24, trapping rabbits with simple snares. A wire loop, a trigger stick, and knowledge of where rabbits run produced meat for the family. A single trap line of 10 snares checked every morning yielded 1 to 3 rabbits a week in season. The skill is learning rabbit runs, which are visible if you know what to look for, and tying the noose at the correct height. Skill 25, reading weather without forecasts. Your grandmother knew it would rain because the cows lay down, the swallows flew low, and the smoke from the chimney curled toward the ground. She knew a hard winter was coming when the squirrels stored heavier than usual and the corn husks were thick. She knew frost was coming because of the smell of the air and the absence of dew. None of this is magic. It is pattern recognition built from 40 years of paying attention. The squirrels are reading barometric pressure. The swallows are following insects that fly lower in humid air. The smoke curls down because cold air is settling on a warm front. She was a barometer, a humidity gauge, and a 5-day forecast, walking around for free. Those are 25 skills. There are 16 more I could not fit in this video. Pemmican production, pickling eggs in beet brine, tincture making with grain alcohol, farmer cheese with vinegar and milk, tooth powder formulations with clove and chalk, hardtack baking for 12-month storage, cold smoking fish on the riverbank, building a solar oven from a cardboard box, making vinegar from apple peels, composting in a way that produces heat for a cold frame, building a cob oven from clay and straw, sprouting grain for vitamin C in winter, identifying poisonous look-alike plants for common forage, making rennet from nettle leaves, building a smokehouse from scrap lumber, saving seed properly for next season. All 16 are inside the survival research. link in the description, one-time access, 7 days money-back guarantee. This is not a theory channel. It is a reference for the day you need it. One last thing. If this video was useful, the most helpful thing you can do is subscribe. The channel grows when people who recognize the value share these skills with one parent, one neighbor, one adult child who has never thought about it. Eleanor's mother taught her these things in rural Georgia in the 1960s. Most of us never had that grandmother. This channel is the closest replacement I can build. When the grid fails, knowledge does not. See you in the next one.